If you're an Aquarius and something in your body just felt tired of being strong, this message is for you. There was a time in your life when you didn't feel safe emotionally, energetically, or even inside your own heart. Not because you were weak, but because you were carrying too much alone. Aquarius, you were never meant to survive by yourself. Before we go any further, if you're ready to receive support instead of resistance, comment below "I allow safety now." Because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's the moment where your journey stops being lonely and starts becoming protected. Stay with me. This is where everything begins to make sense. Aquarius, there's something about the way your light moves through the world. It doesn't shout, it doesn't ask to be seen. And yet people notice it anyway. You've probably felt that your whole life, that quiet sense of being different, not better, not worse, just out of sync. Like you walked into a room already hearing a frequency no one else seemed to pick up. And so you learned early how to adjust, how to read the energy, how to stay alert. Because for you, safety was never something that simply existed. It was something you had to create. You might not even remember the first time you felt it, that subtle tightening in your chest. That moment you realized no one was really watching your back. So you decided you would. You became observant, independent, emotionally intelligent, the kind of person who can sense a shift in the air before anyone else names it. But here's the part no one ever tells you. That awareness didn't come from paranoia. It came from sensitivity, from openness, from a heart that doesn't close easily. Aquarius, your energy is naturally welcoming. You make people feel understood without trying, seen without effort. And for the right people, that feels like home. But for others, that same light can feel like something to take from, something to lean on, something to use. So you learn to protect yourself, not with walls, but with strength, with logic, with distance. You told yourself, I'll be okay if I don't need too much. I'll be safe if I stay capable. I'll survive if I don't expect anyone to stay. And maybe you did survive, but surviving quietly takes a cost. Have you ever noticed how tired you feel after always being the steady one? The understanding one, the one who doesn't fall apart. How even your rest feels alert. Part of you is still listening for danger. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been holding more than your share. Because Aquarius, your light doesn't just attract connection. It attracts contrast. It pulls in both warmth and shadow. And when you don't yet believe you can be held, you end up learning how to hold yourself through everything. But something has been shifting, quietly, almost imperceptibly. You may feel it as a slowing, a soft resistance to repeating old patterns, a deeper pause before you give your energy away, not because you've hardened, but because some part of you knows you're not meant to keep living in survival mode. You were never meant to carry your awareness like armor. You were meant to carry it like insight. And as you listen right now, I want you to notice your breath. Just for a moment. Notice how it feels to not explain yourself, to not anticipate anyone else's needs, to simply be here. Because there's a different kind of safety available to you now, one that doesn't require you to shrink, or brace, or stay 2 steps ahead. And the more you allow yourself to feel that possibility, the more your world begins to respond in kind, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Like something real finally finding its way toward you. You know, Aquarius, there's a reason you became strong without ever meaning to. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't ego. It was necessity. Somewhere along the way, you realized no one was coming to clean up the mess for you. No one was going to sit with you while you figured things out. So you did what you always do. You adapted. You learned how to process pain quietly, how to stand back up without asking for help, how to keep moving even when something inside you felt cracked. You didn't do it because you wanted to prove anything. You did it because stopping didn't feel like an option, and the world applauded that version of you. The capable one. The rational one. The one who doesn't fall apart. But here's the part you rarely say out loud. You weren't allowed to be fragile. Not really. Not safely. There was no soft place to land. No space where you could lower your guard without consequences. So you learned how to hold yourself together before anyone noticed you were struggling. You became the one who understands. The one who listens between the lines. The one who knows what people need before they say it. And somehow, that turned into your role. People lean on you. They confide in you. They feel better just being near you. But when it came time for someone to notice your weight, your silence, your exhaustion, there was often no one standing there. And that does something to a person. It teaches you to be self-sufficient. But it also teaches you to expect very little. To minimize your needs. To believe that being low maintenance is the same as being strong. Aquarius, have you ever wondered what it would feel like to not have to explain why you're tired? To not have to justify needing rest? To not have to earn care by being useful? Because the truth is, you didn't become independent because you don't need anyone. You became independent because needing someone didn't feel safe. So you learned how to survive on your own energy, your own logic, your own inner scaffolding. And yes, it made you resilient, but it also kept you slightly on edge, always prepared, always aware. There's a difference between being strong and never being allowed to be held. And lately, you might feel something shifting in that belief. A quiet question forming beneath your usual composure. What if I don't have to do everything alone anymore? What if strength doesn't always mean solitude? You may not be able to name it yet, but something in you is starting to loosen, to soften, to imagine a version of life where support doesn't come with a cost. And as that possibility settles in, almost gently, the world around you begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where you're allowed to exhale. Not because you've given up your independence, but because you're finally remembering you were never meant to fight for your place in the first place. And in that quiet realization, something steady starts moving closer. Aquarius, there's something you may have noticed, even if you never had words for it. Not everyone knows how to be around light. Real light. The kind that doesn't try to impress. The kind that simply exists. You carry that kind of presence. When you listen, people feel heard. When you stay quiet, people feel calmer. When you sit with someone, they feel less alone. And you never learned this from a book. It's just who you are. Your energy creates space. It softens people. It lowers their defenses. For some, that feels like relief, like finally exhaling after holding their breath for too long. Those are the ones who meet you with respect, with care, with reciprocity. But not everyone comes with clean hands. Some people feel your openness and mistake it for access. They sense your understanding and confuse it with permission. They lean too heavily. They take without asking. They rest in your presence but forget you also need rest. And because you don't love loudly, because you don't demand, because you don't dramatize your pain, they don't always notice when they're draining you. Or worse, they notice and keep going anyway. That's the part no one prepared you for. That your kindness could place you in situations where you have to choose between being yourself and being safe. So you learn to stay alert even while being gentle. To offer warmth with a subtle exit plan. To keep part of your heart watching the door. And over time, that creates a quiet tension inside. You start to wonder why love feels risky. Why closeness feels like something you have to manage. Why being seen sometimes feels like exposure instead of comfort. Aquarius, your light was never the problem. But light attracts attention. And attention is neutral. Until it isn't. Some people approach you because they feel better around you. Others approach because they want to feel better through you. That difference matters. Even if you didn't always know how to name it. So when you think back on moments where you felt uneasy, overextended, or emotionally unsafe, it wasn't because you trusted too much. It was because you were open in a world that doesn't always know how to handle openness responsibly. And yet, despite all of that, you never lost your capacity to care. You didn't harden. You didn't close completely. You just became more selective with your light. That's wisdom, not fear. And now, something subtle is happening again. You may feel less willing to explain yourself, less willing to overgive, less interested in connections that require you to disappear a little, not because you've changed who you are, but because you're beginning to understand your value. Your presence is not a resource to be consumed. It's a gift meant to be honored. And as you hold that truth more steadily, the kind of energy that finds you begins to shift. Not rushed, not dramatic, just different, quieter, more grounded. Like something that knows how to stay without taking anything away. Aquarius, something about your life feels different now. Not louder, not easier, just slower. It's almost uncomfortable at first, because you were used to moving forward by force, by endurance, by telling yourself, I can handle this. I always do. But lately, life hasn't been asking you to push. It's been asking you to pause. Moments stretch longer than they used to. Old reactions don't come as quickly. Situations that once felt familiar now leave a strange aftertaste in your chest. That's not confusion. That's awareness arriving. For a long time, your role was survival. Keeping yourself upright, functional, composed. You learned how to make it through anything. Even when it hurt. Even when it wasn't fair. Even when no one noticed the weight you were carrying. But this time, life isn't interested in how much you can endure. It's interested in how honestly you can feel. So things slow down, not to punish you, but to stop you from abandoning yourself again. You may notice that you're less willing to tolerate certain dynamics. Conversations that drain you. Connections that ask you to shrink. Expectations that require you to explain your worth. And for the first time, you don't rush to fix that discomfort. You let it speak. You're beginning to understand something important. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not every bond needs to be maintained out of loyalty or history. Not every door needs to stay open just because it always has. This isn't you becoming cold. This is you becoming clear. There is a quiet strength in choosing where your energy goes, in deciding that peace matters more than being understood, that safety matters more than being liked, and maybe that feels strange, because for so long, you were the one adapting, accommodating, making space. Now, you're noticing where space needs to exist around you. You may feel a subtle grief here, for the versions of you who didn't know they were allowed to say no, who believed love meant endurance, who thought protection was something you earned by being easy. Let that grief pass through you. It's not here to stay, because underneath it is something steadier, a growing respect for yourself, a deeper trust in your instincts, a recognition that safety is not selfish, it's a boundary, a foundation, a right. And as you honor that right, you might notice that your body feels calmer, your thoughts feel quieter, your decisions feel less urgent. You're no longer moving from fear of losing. You're moving from knowing what you deserve. This isn't about control. It's about alignment. When you stop forcing yourself to survive, you make room for something else to meet you. Something that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't test your limits to see how much you'll give. Just something that understands you've done enough holding on. And without any dramatic shift, without any announcement, you begin to sense it. A different kind of presence entering your life. One that doesn't require you to brace yourself. One that doesn't ask you to prove your strength. Just something steady, patient, close enough to feel. Aquarius, at some point you begin to notice a different kind of presence entering your life. Not announced, not dramatic, no grand gesture to mark the moment. It almost feels quiet, and that's how you know it's real. This person doesn't arrive with intensity. They don't rush toward you. They don't try to impress you with words or promises. They simply show up, consistently, steadily. There is something grounding about the way they hold themselves. Like they're not trying to take space from you, and not trying to fill it either. They don't ask you to be less. They don't ask you to explain who you are. They don't need to reshape you into something more manageable. You can feel that immediately. Around them, your nervous system softens. Your shoulders drop without you noticing. Your thoughts slow down. Not because you're losing awareness, but because you don't have to stay on guard. Their energy isn't loud. It doesn't compete with yours. It doesn't try to lead you or pull you somewhere you're not ready to go. It stays close, attentive, present. And what's interesting is how safe that feels without ever feeling confining. You still feel like yourself, independent, curious, free. But there's a subtle difference now. You don't feel like you're floating alone anymore. This person doesn't protect you by controlling your world. They protect you by respecting it. They notice when something feels off. They listen when you speak. They trust your intelligence instead of questioning it. They don't step in front of you to block your path. They stand beside you, watching the same horizon. And maybe that's what surprises you the most. That protection can be quiet. That safety can feel spacious. That strength doesn't have to overpower you to be real. You might catch yourself testing this at first, waiting for the moment where the dynamic shifts, where you're expected to compromise your edges, your independence, your truth. But it doesn't come. Instead, what you find is steadiness, a calm presence that doesn't flinch when you're fully yourself. That doesn't retreat when things get complex. That doesn't disappear when you don't need fixing. And slowly, without forcing anything, you begin to relax into it. Not because you're dependent, but because you finally feel met. This connection doesn't rush you toward a future. It doesn't pressure you to define what it is. It simply creates a consistent sense of safety in the present. And that safety changes the way you move through the world. You speak more freely. You take fewer emotional shortcuts. You stop bracing for impact. Not because life suddenly became predictable, but because you're no longer facing it alone. You may realize something important here. Being protected doesn't mean being diminished. It means being supported enough to expand. And as you continue to move with this energy beside you, you'll notice how different your choices feel. How much more grounded your instincts become. How much easier it is to trust your own timing. Nothing is being forced. Nothing is being taken. Just a steady presence, matching your pace, ready to stay. And in that calm alignment, the path ahead no longer feels like something you have to defend yourself against. It begins to feel like something you're allowed to walk into with confidence. Aquarius, what's different now is not who you are. It's how it feels to be yourself. For so long, freedom meant distance. It meant space. It meant keeping enough room between you and others so you could breathe. You learned to equate independence with safety, to believe that needing nothing was the same as being free. But this connection doesn't ask you to choose. You don't feel your edges disappearing. You don't feel your voice getting quieter. You don't feel the urge to simplify yourself so someone else can understand you. You're still complex, still curious, still deeply your own person. The difference is subtle, but profound. You don't feel like you're floating untethered anymore. There's a quiet awareness now that when you turn around, someone is there, not watching over you, not directing you, just present. It's strange how unfamiliar that can feel at first, to be supported without being managed, to be close to someone without being absorbed. You may catch yourself checking for the cost, waiting for the moment when freedom is traded for security, when autonomy comes with conditions. But it doesn't happen. Instead, you feel more spacious inside yourself, more willing to explore, more open to curiosity without fear. Because when you know there's something solid beneath you, you don't have to calculate every step. You still move through the world in your own way.
At your own pace.
Following your own rhythm, you still question, you still wander, you still imagine futures that don't exist yet. But now there's a steadiness that travels with you. Not something that anchors you down, something that anchors you inward. You don't feel watched, you feel witnessed. And that changes how high you're willing to go. You take risks without feeling reckless. You open your heart without losing discernment. You speak your truth without rehearsing the fallout. Not because you've lost caution, but because you trust the ground beneath your feet. This kind of companionship doesn't cage you. It frees you from the need to constantly self-contain. You realize you don't have to disappear to keep the peace. You don't have to over-explain to stay connected. You don't have to dilute your vision to be loved. You are still whole, still autonomous, still unmistakably you. But now, when the world feels heavy, you don't have to carry it alone. You can lean back without falling. You can rest without retreating. You can soar without wondering what happens if you land. That's what changes everything, not the loss of freedom, but the discovery that freedom doesn't have to be lonely. And as you move forward with this quiet support at your back, you begin to notice something else. Your confidence deepens. Your choices feel cleaner. Your sense of direction sharpens. Because when you're no longer protecting yourself from connection, you can finally focus on where you're going. And without any announcement, without any dramatic shift, the horizon in front of you feels wider. Not because you're escaping, but because you're supported enough to explore it fully. And you keep moving, steady, clear, aware that whatever comes next, you don't have to face it alone. Aquarius, you've lived long enough to recognize a pattern. The connections that arrive suddenly, the ones that felt electric, instant, intense. They swept you off your feet, pulled you into something that felt alive, only to disappear just as fast. You remember how strong they felt at the beginning, how real, how convincing. And you remember how confusing it was when they ended. How something so powerful could also be so fragile. You never lacked passion. You never lacked depth. What you lacked was consistency. This time feels different in a way that's almost hard to trust. There's no rush here, no dramatic confessions, no overwhelming momentum pulling you forward faster than your body can keep up. At first, that might feel unfamiliar, even boring, compared to what you've known. But stay with the feeling for a moment. Notice how nothing is being forced, how time is allowed to do its work, how silence doesn't create anxiety. This connection doesn't try to convince you it's real. It simply is. Days pass, weeks pass, and instead of intensity fading, there's something else building. Reliability. They show up when they say they will. They remain present when things feel ordinary. They don't disappear when emotions settle. There's no pressure to perform. No fear that one wrong move will change everything. And slowly, you begin to realize how different this feels in your body. Your heart doesn't race with uncertainty. It steadies. Your mind doesn't spiral with questions. It quiets. You're not constantly checking the ground beneath you, wondering when it might give way. This connection doesn't rely on emotional highs to survive. It relies on trust. Trust built through small moments, shared presence, consistency over time. That may not sound exciting at first, but to someone who has lived through emotional whiplash, it's everything. You're no longer guessing where you stand. You're no longer reading between lines that shouldn't exist. What's offered matches what's given. What's said aligns with what's done. And that alignment creates safety, not the kind that traps you, the kind that allows you to relax. You don't have to hold your breath here. You don't have to brace for impact. You can take things as they come, one moment at a time. This connection understands that trust isn't rushed. That presence matters more than promises. That showing up is louder than any declaration. And maybe, for the first time, you don't feel the urge to define where this is going. You're comfortable letting it unfold. Because nothing about it feels temporary. It doesn't feel like something that burns bright and vanishes. It feels like something that stays lit, quietly, reliably. And as you move within this slower rhythm, you begin to feel something settle inside you. A sense that this isn't built on excitement alone, but on something far more durable. something that knows how to last. And without realizing it, you stop preparing for the ending. You start being present for what's actually here. And that presence, that calm certainty, changes how you relate to everything else in your life. Because when trust becomes the foundation, you no longer need intensity to feel alive. You just need what's real. Aquarius, if you're still here with me, it means something inside you was listening closely. Not just with your mind, with your body. With the part of you that has been quiet for a long time. So let me say this gently. Yes, you have felt unsafe before. In ways that were hard to explain. In moments where you looked fine on the outside, but something inside you stayed alert. That experience shaped you. It made you thoughtful. It made you strong. It made you aware. But it was never meant to define the rest of your life. You were not born to live in a constant state of readiness. You were not meant to measure every connection by how much it might cost you. You were not meant to keep proving that you can handle everything on your own. That chapter taught you something important. And now, it is complete. This time, you don't have to tighten your grip. You don't have to hold your breath. You don't have to brace yourself for impact. You are allowed to soften without losing yourself. You are allowed to rest without falling behind. You are allowed to receive without feeling indebted. And maybe that still feels unfamiliar. Maybe part of you is waiting for the catch, waiting for the moment when safety turns into obligation. That's okay. Trust doesn't arrive all at once. It grows, quietly, at its own pace. What matters is that you no longer walk through life assuming you're on your own. You don't need to keep your heart guarded at all times. You don't need to prove your resilience. You don't need to earn the right to be supported. You have already done enough. There is a difference between being alone and being independent. And you are learning how to keep your independence without carrying loneliness as a constant companion. You can still choose yourself. Still honor your individuality. Still follow your own path. But now, there is room for connection that doesn't threaten your freedom. There is space for support that doesn't diminish your strength. You don't need to announce this shift. You don't need to justify it to anyone. You will feel it in your body, in the way your shoulders sit a little lower, in the way your breath moves more easily, in the way your decisions feel less defensive. Aquarius, you were never meant to disappear to survive. You were meant to be seen, held, respected, and protected, not by control, not by fear, but by presence, consistency, and quiet loyalty. So if something inside you is beginning to believe that, even just a little, let it. Let this be the season where you stop mistaking solitude for strength, where you stop confusing endurance with love. You are not destined to be alone. You never were. You are destined to walk forward with clarity, with support, with a sense of safety that doesn't require you to give up who you are. And as you sit with that truth, as it settles into you, you may notice how the world responds. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, as if something has finally aligned with the way you were always meant to live. Aquarius, before you go, I want you to notice something. You're still here, which means this wasn't just background noise. It touched something real, something quiet, something that's been waiting for permission to rest. Here's the part that might surprise you. The moment you stop bracing for what could go wrong, life starts showing you what can finally go right. Not in loud ways, not in dramatic signs, but in steadiness, in alignment, in people and moments that don't ask you to shrink. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a message about someone else at all. Maybe it was about you remembering that safety is not a luxury, it's a baseline. If something in you feels a little lighter right now, a little clearer, a little more willing to trust your own timing, honor that. And if you feel called to, leave a comment below and simply say, I choose safety, not for anyone else, for yourself. If this message resonated, subscribe and stay close. This space is for Aquarius souls who are done surviving and ready to live differently. Because this journey doesn't end here, it deepens. There are more truths waiting to surface, more clarity coming, more reminders that you are not alone in the way you see the world. Trust what brought you here tonight. Trust the pace you're moving at. And most of all, trust yourself. The next message is already on its way.